Hi friends, welcome to my channel Go Digital Get IT right here. In this video, we'll continue learning lists. We'll try to learn different operations that can be performed on lists. I created a list here called flowers and it has the names of different flowers in the list. If I have to count the number of elements that this list has, the list by the name flowers has, I just need to pass the list name within the function length. Okay. And let's say I want to count the number of times a particular element occurs. For example, I just want to know the number of times sunflowers appears in the list flowers. So I will write flowers dot count. That's the function. And within this, I will pass the name of the element whose count I'm trying to figure out. So I'll pass sunflower here and I hit run, it gives me 1. Let's try to modify the number of times sunflower occurs in the list flowers and see if that change gets reflected. So I will have sunflower twice in my list. Okay. And now I'll try to print the number of times the sunflower occurs and let's see if it gives me 2. There we go. So the output is 2 in this case. Okay. Now let's say I want to figure out the index of a particular element. For example, I created the same list flowers, but this time I want to capture the index of rows. So I will write flowers, which is nothing but the list name dot index, and within that I will pass the element whose index I'm trying to figure out. In this case, it's rows. I'll pass this within a print function to check my output, and that says 2, which makes sense. Okay, let's now see how we can append some elements to a list. Okay, so I create the same list flowers again. This time I want to append another flower named marigold to this. So I will write the name of the list flowers dot append. This is the function using which I can append or concatenate an additional element to an existing list. For example, I want to append marigold to this. And now I will print flowers to see that the new element marigold has been added to the list of flowers which we had created. Now let's say I want to add the new element at a particular position. Let's say at index number 3 or maybe index number 4. So in that case, I'll have to use another function called insert. For example, I create the same list again, and this time I want to insert uh, another element, let's say marigold again, but I want to insert it at position number 3. So I type this, I give the position number or the index number, and then I give the new element which I want to add. And now if I print the flowers, I would see that marigold now has the index 3 in this new list. And all the elements after marigold has been pushed one level to the right. Okay. Okay, if I have to now concatenate two lists together. So I have a list called flowers. I will create another list called fruits within which I will have some elements like apple, um, orange, and let's say grapes. So I have 3 elements in the second list. And I want to concatenate the element within the flowers and the fruits together as a single list. So I'll use the plus sign for this. So I'll write flowers plus fruits. Now you need to be careful here. This is not a mathematical computation, it's not an addition, it's rather just concatenating the two elements together. So I will have a print command to it to view the results, and now I see all the elements from the flowers as well as the fruits have been concatenated as one single list. Alright, as a next item, we will try to learn how exactly we can remove items from a list. How can we remove items from a list? So the very basic function which we normally use to remove an item from a list is a pop function. So if I write flowers dot pop, so that will remove the item which is in the end. So in this case, it will be hibiscus. After this, if I print flowers, let's see if it has removed the last item. Yes, it has. Okay. Now something to notice here that this is something which is permanent. I didn't have to save it back to the flowers again. So if I write flowers.pop, it will impact the original list flowers. It's not a temporary change, it's a permanent change which is happening to my list. All right. Now, if I have to remove an element which is, let's say, lotus, which has an index of 3, okay? So at a particular index, I'm trying to remove the element. So in that case, I will pass the index of the element which I want to remove within the pop function. So I mentioned flowers.pop3 and I run it again, and to observe that the element with index 3, which was lotus, is now dropped and no more there within the list which I just created. Friends, don't forget to like, share and subscribe this channel. That will encourage us to upload further more such videos. Alright, let's try to see how can we replace a particular element with another new element. For example, in this case, the list flowers. I'm not happy with the name lotus here. Rather, I want to have marigold, which is index number 3. So for that, I will write flowers and give the index which I want to change, and will replace it with the element, new element, which I want to replace it with. I will write marigold. If I have to check, I will write print the list flowers. So let's see if this works. Yes, it does. So which was lotus has now been replaced with marigold as a third element in the list. Now with this in our mind, take a pause and let me know if I have to change it dynamically. When I say dynamically, for example, I am not sure, I don't have the information what's the position of lotus in this flowers, in this list. Okay, it could be in the third element, tomorrow it could be in the fifth element, day after tomorrow it could be the first element. So the index changes, and I want to dynamically replace wherever we find lotus, replace it with marigold. Take a pause, think over it, and let me know if you're able to solve it in the comment section. All right, so let's try to solve this. So I'll just copy this and paste it here. So if we observe, we need to provide the index of the element which we are trying to replace within the square bracket. I had hard coded it to 3 because I already knew the element which I want to replace has an index of 3. But let's say it dynamically changes, which means it could be at any position. So that means if I can replace this number 3 with the index of, let's say, lotus, that should solve my purpose. Now, how exactly can I do that? I can do that by using the index function which we had learned a while back. Okay, so what I'll do is instead of 3, I will replace it with flowers dot index, and I pass the element whose index I want. For example, it's lotus. So flowers dot index lotus. This will always fetch me the index of the element lotus. Doesn't matter what position. It could be at one position, it could be at third position, it could be at fifth position. Whatever position it is, it will always fetch me the respective index ID, and that is being passed inside the flowers index and being replaced as marigold. So if I run this now, the lotus has now been replaced with marigold. I can validate it by changing the position of lotus. For example, I will change lotus from the third position, or maybe from the index number 3 to index number 1. Now let's run it and see Wherever the lotus is, it changes the lotus to marigold. Thank you so much for listening to this video. Stay tuned for the next part where we continue learning lists.